Welcome to the Interop. Today my guest is Sunny Aggarwal, co-founder at Osmosis, the greatest DEX in the Interchain. In today's conversation, we'll discuss the Mars-Neutron merger and the Osmosis counterproposal. We'll talk about Prop 858 on the Cosmos Hub to provide 900k of Atom protocol-owned liquidity to Osmosis. We'll look at Atom's only chance at becoming a capital asset and saving the hub, and plans for Osmosis 2.0. I'm also dying to find out why he thinks Atom 1 makes sense. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop every week. And remember that none of what we discuss here on the Interop is investment advice. And if you enjoy this content, please consider staking with us. We're validating on Avmos, Quicksilver, Osmosis, and Juno. Just look for Interop in the active set. My guest, Sunny Aggarwal, is coming up next, right here on the Interop. Hey, Sunny. How's it going? Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a little while. It's been a while since we've done any podcasts together, since you're on your Epicenter hiatus. I think last time you were on was sometime, it was a long time ago.
I was on the 50th, the 500th episode anniversary.
You are going to be on the 500 episodes, which, by the way, I should mention here, Epicenter is celebrating its not 500 episodes, it's 10 years.
10 years.
10-year episode on December 20th, and it's going to be a live stream. So anybody who's like into Epicenter should definitely check it out. Subscribe to the channel, the Twitter. We'll announce it there, and we'll have all kinds of cool people. It's going to be basically like a call-in show, and we'll have 2 hours of reminiscing on 10 years of podcasting. But anyways, I wanted to get you on to just, catch up. And there's so much stuff happening. And actually, we were supposed to do this last week, but you had an alarm clock malfunction. So it's actually good that we're doing it now because there's so much more going on now that is kind of coming together. And so I don't know where to start, man. Like, do you want to talk about the neutron stuff right away, or do you have some more general topics you want to cover first?
I don't know. You there's so much to discuss. You pick where to start.
Let's do it. All right. So like basically today, Mars announced that they were going to basically move from having their own app chain, right? Their own app chain with their own validator set to becoming part of Neutron. So basically the Mars hub would be part of Neutron. Now, I think there's been some confusion around this because like I see people on Twitter saying, oh, they're moving away from Osmosis, which is like kind of not really true, right? Because like Neutron's home is not really Osmosis. Like Neutron is a sovereign app chain that's sole purpose. I mean, aside from having, I think, that kind of their treasury there or their backup, like their kind of stopgap fund, is to coordinate different outposts, right? So they're just moving that to Neutron, which makes sense from perspective that like running your own chain is expensive, and I've been talking about this for a while, anticipating that chains would end up kind of not downgrading, but going to a more cost-effective way of running, and that's what they're doing. But curious to get your take on this, and also maybe expanding on some of the spicy stuff that's been going on Twitter since they announced that.
Yeah, so it's funny. It's like the Mars hub as a standalone chain was actually like my idea from like rewind 18 months. Terra just crashed, and like Mars is trying to figure out what to do now. Me and Larry were actually like the ones who came up with this concept of a lending app chain that will unify different markets. So like what I mean by this is if you look at something like Aave, right? Like Aave has deployments on Ethereum, Avalanche, like a bunch of different L2s, but these are all like isolated markets, right? So the price of like the lending rate on ETH on like different markets is different. And when I have to, as a lender or a borrower, I have to choose like which market to go to. And so the idea that we had was like, hey, why don't we have like a unified lending market where it's you should deposit USDC to be lent on Mars, but it will have these outposts. That's why they were called outposts originally on every chain. And when you deposit, it will move the USDC to wherever there's demand. And if you want to borrow more than what's on your chain, it will just use IBC to pull in more from other places. So it actually builds one unified lending market. So that was the vision behind Mars Appchain. And to launch, they started with just an outpost on Osmosis, and then they were going to, while they build out the lending Appchain stuff.
And it makes sense, right? Because like if you're borrowing, like you don't care who you're borrowing from or what chain you're borrowing from. You just want to borrow. You just want to borrow ETH or whatever, right? Like
exactly.
It shouldn't matter where you're borrowing from, and you shouldn't have to reason about what the different lending rates are. Like if you go to
especially for a lender, right? Like a lender should just like deposit somewhere, and then it will just should just handle where to, where the best borrow APRs are. So yeah, that's kind of where Mars started with. But then over time, they kind of like pivoted towards like, okay, wanting to focus more on leverage trading. And like, they realized Osmosis is like the place where all the volumes are, and that's why they built like Mars V2 on Osmosis. And eventually they realized that, okay, two things happened. One, they realized that like once you start diving into the details, like this like unified lending market app chain is actually a little bit more difficult than we originally expected. I still think it's doable, but it's definitely a little bit like different than what more challenging than what was expected. The other is that like they kind of want to just focus on this leverage trading, especially as they mentioned in their proposal, this new perps product that they were building. And so we actually were working together on a similarly structured deal with the Mars team as the Neutron one, and almost like very, 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 very similar terms. But ours is going to be from the community pool, right? Like I think the Neutron is doing it from their foundation, but for us, like we were suggesting, it should go through the community pool. Like Osmo holders should have a say in this and everything. Basically we were going to do that, but then I think what happened was Mars got a little bit spooked with the amount of competition there is on perps on Osmosis already, where like we have Levana obviously having massive success. We did inform both the I guess this is a good time to announce this maybe, but like the Osmosis team is also working on a perps implementation as well, which ours is slightly different than the Levana and Mars design. Personally, so we're doing like an order book based thing. The like Mars and Levana designs right now are very Oracle based. They're I think simpler, faster, go to market. But like long term, I'm a big believer that order books are going to end up like being the main sort of thing, and so that's why like we've spent a lot of time like designing this order book thing. It's a little bit farther out, and our plan is to build that. And I think the more market, like the more things there are going on a single chain, the better. With perps, like you want multiple markets, people will be arbing between them. In general, I just think perps are actually this like super new market structure, right? They've only, if you think about it, only have been around for like 5 years, right? 5-6 years. And like they've had like one round of innovation with like, you had BitMEX, and then I think FTX did a lot of like good improvements. Then you had like GMX kind of doing like different improvements, and like you're seeing this like Cambrian explosion right now of like all these different like models for how perps can work. And so I think there's actually just room for a lot of different perps markets, right? Like, and our goal is to make sure that everything building on Osmosis can like, have this like very, positive sum thing. Like the same thing you see on Arbitrum, right? You have like multiple perps markets like all on Arbitrum together, and like I think it's just good for everyone because it just attracts more capital onto the chain, and you have more interesting stuff happening. So that was the plan. But I think the Mars team just got a little bit spooked and would rather just go somewhere where there's less competition, even if that means that there's less users and volume. And I think it was probably that exclusivity clause that like they're like, oh, we don't want to be in a situation where we're stuck on Osmosis and can't go anywhere else. And so that's why they took the Neutron, I guess, made a similar counteroffer. But so if you see the proposal, in order to keep Cosmos exciting, John Galt from Stride actually just put up a proposal like an hour ago to basically match the Neutron offer, but remove any exclusivity. So now it's like, hey, all we're asking is like, hey, come bring Mars Hub onto Osmosis. You can deploy Mars on your perps protocol on both Osmosis and Neutron. There's no like exclusivity or anything like that. And I think we're going to end up seeing something similar to Levana, where Levana deployed on Osmosis, say, and Injective, and has like close to zero traction on any of them, and all the traction's on Osmosis. So, I think the best thing for Mars holders to do is probably to like take the zero non-compete, the zero exclusivity offer, and deploy in multiple places, and hedge their bets.
Yeah, but again, like this is a question of the coordination mechanism for Mars, right? I mean, whether that's on Neutron or on as its own chain or as a roll up or like, why would that matter if they have deployments, outposts on Osmosis, on Neutron, on Injective, or wherever?
It matters because the Neutron offer is asking for exclusivity. Any new feature has to exist only on Neutron for 3 months before it can be deployed anywhere else. And I think that's just going to hamstring them forever. As a Mars token holder, this is like just a terrible deal in my opinion.
Right. Okay. Got it. Yeah. So, which is why I guess like the V2 will continue to exist on Osmosis, but this perps product, would only exist on Mars probably.
On Neutron for 3 months.
On Neutron.
For 3 months.
For 3 months. Got it. Okay. Yeah. What's your take? Like, as sort of like having been close to this project, and Osmosis, I think, was pretty enthusiastic about this project early on, and I think Mars was kind of like the first outpost or one of the first outposts on Osmosis. How do you feel about the whole thing?
I mean, I've always even till now, I have like a deep respect for the Mars team. They're like a team that I've always wanted to work very closely with, even since like the Terra days. I think that we'll still honestly we'll still be working closely with them on like the Mars V2 and like, Osmosis team. Like our team is building a UI for Mars V2 into the Osmosis front end, so you can do margin trading. So I think we'll, no matter what, have to be like, we'll still be working closely with the Mars team. But I think that they're making a mistake by taking this like exclusivity agreement from Neutron.
So this other proposal, this Osmosis proposal, I just read it. I kind of like read through it quickly before we got on here. But does it have any? Does it make a better pricing offer? Because there is money involved here.
Yeah, no, I think it just matches the same pricing offer as Neutron.
Okay. And so what's next here? Basically, like on Neutron, this has to go to governance. It also has to go to governance on Mars,
and Osmosis, I guess.
And Osmosis will also have a proposal up.
So basically, Osmosis, I think the reasonable order of events is that Osmosis and Neutron both need to make proposal. To be honest, I don't really fully understand how the Neutron Foundation is set up. Like it says in the proposal, it says that the tokens, like the Mars tokens, 60 million Mars tokens, go to the Neutron Foundation, not to the Neutron DAO, which is a little bit surprising. So I don't know. From Osmosis' side, I think that everything should go, like this should all be done by the community pool. So that way, like, eventually we want to have like pass through voting access and stuff. So like, okay, if you have like, let's say, so the Osmosis community pool has 60 million Mars tokens. If you own like 1% of staked Osmo, you should have the voting right of 1% of that 60 million Mars tokens, right? And so yeah, so that's why we would want it in the community pool, not in like a foundation or something. Yeah, so basically, I think the order of operations from the Osmosis side is we put up a proposal, which what John did was put up this proposal asking Osmosis community pool to extend this offer to Mars, and then if that is agreed upon, passed by Osmosis, then we send that. Now it's up to the Mars governance process to decide which offer they want to take. I don't know how they're gonna decide between the two. Maybe they have to run some sort of like bridge off or something, like some multiple choice rank voting or something.
Wow, interesting. We have like high stakes bidding going on here between crypto protocols, like hostile takeover and counter offers. I mean, it's going to be interesting. Do you have any idea of like the timelines here? Like when is this going up on Mars, or do we know that?
I believe the Neutron governance process requires it to be on their forum for 14 days.
Yeah.
So I think that's at least some timeline. That minimum. The Osmosis governance process takes 2 days on forum and then 5-day voting period. So I think technically Osmosis has not created any sort of offer to Mars yet. So we would have to like go through our own governance process in order to extend any sort of offer. It's unclear if Osmo holders even think this is valuable, right? Like this is saying that like effectively we need to like, what we're doing is offering Mars 3 million USDC, which requires selling 3 million Osmo. There's a lot of buyers of Osmo right now. Like, I think there's a couple of funds that reached out about like interested in doing like OTC swap with the Osmosis community pool. They're like, hey, we want to buy like a few $1 million of Osmo. Like, can we pay the community pool in USDC or Bitcoin? So I think that would be a cool way of getting some funds for that. But like, it's up to Osmo holders to decide like, is this worth this, or let Neutron foot the bill? And
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, looking at it from the perspective of Mars, there is a lot of competition on Osmosis. Like Lavana, although it is a different product, and I think they have a different vision, is a very similar product competing for the same liquidity. And Osmosis now, you mentioned, is working on a perps product, so that's also competing for the same liquidity as these projects, right? As these like communities. How should they be looking at Osmosis? Potentially, there is this term in tech which is to get Sherlocked, and this is when Apple famously built this functionality that had basically put out of business this software, this very OG Apple software called Sherlock, and then subsequently implementing things that kind of put out of business the apps that were being built on Apple. How do you account for that and reassure those communities that like Osmosis will not outcompete these protocols?
Yeah, I mean, I think for like Oracle-based perps, they're all competing for the same liquidity, and it's like I don't know if I actually agree with that. Like, well, yes, we're all competing to like steal liquidity from like Binance, right? Like that's where the actual like pools of liquidity are, and it's like DYDX, Osmosis, Mars, Lavana. We're all like, if we're all just fighting over like the same liquidity that's internal to that's already on these chains, that defeats the point, right? Like the liquidity we need to get is how do we get liquidity from there? And like you look at like I think liquidity begets more liquidity, right? So it's like you look at Arbitrum, like every new perps protocol that launches on Arbitrum actually benefits from the like capital that's like in that ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And so how do we make sure Osmosis doesn't compete, right? Like, I mean, at some point, I think Osmosis holders obviously need to do what's best for Osmosis revenue generation, and that means like that means balancing like internal revenue with like retaining partners. And I think there's a lot of ways that the Oracle stuff like works together with with an order books system, right? The oracles are much better for like, I think, faster for bootstrapping new markets before you have like active market makers. The OMX team like is working on this like perps aggregator, which is really cool because what it will do is like you can decide, hey, I want like this position, and it will like balance, like it'll like it's kind of like building a 1-inch for perps basically. So it'll like balance your trade between like I think their initial integrations are Levana, DYDX, and GMX on Arbitrum, which is really cool. So it'll like kind of balance trades between them. And then what you'll see is like, oh, if the funding rate spikes on one of them, it'll close your position there and open it there. So like, I think there'll be ways of making sure these things work together. The other thing is I think these Oracle things actually might be able to just turn into vaults on top of the order book. So I think there's a lot of ways for these things to just like be synergistic. And I think the chain will like, continue to support all of them. And we, like I said, right now our focus is not on like, we just informed like Levana and Mars and Margin that, hey, one day we will build an order book perp system, but like right now our focus is on like supporting you guys and help. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that the Osmosis chain needs to work on right now, like as we saw on like the performance side, and I think we're going to be spending the next few months just like focusing on like how do we make Osmosis be this like high performance chain, so that way we can actually build, make sure things like Levana work really seamlessly. And making on-chain order books is not easy. Like even like Serum like failed to really work properly at like on Solana at like times of peak throughput, which is when you need your system to work. And so we are working on like, we have this like new design for an order book that I think will like make it way more performant than anything else that we've seen.
Cool. Well, I want to talk about that a little bit later on. But we didn't talk about Umee also. The Umee announcement that they would merge with Osmosis. What's that about?
Yeah, so I mean that was we've been in talks with Umee for a while, sort of somewhat independent from this, but once they heard about the Mars-Neutron stuff, they're like, hey, we should like accelerate these timelines. If Mars is leaving Osmosis, like Umee believes in Osmosis and would like to double down on it. So they kind of like, we had this like, yeah, let's do this, and so basically Umee will be shutting down their app chain and migrating onto Osmosis. But the thing is, their code is mostly written in Cosmos SDK Go modules right now, so they're going to have to be doing a significant rewrite into CosmWasm in order to do that. And so we'll be supporting them in this, like helping them with like as much as we can. But yeah, then integrating a lot of the products and stuff. Like if Mars ends up focusing more on like the perp stuff, like I said, we're working on a margin trading UI. Maybe we'll end up plugging that into Umee instead of Mars. Yeah, I don't know. Things are obviously, everything's up in the air a little bit. We're seeing how things shake out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it points to a broader trend that I had anticipated would happen, and this I think is some initial indications of it happening. And that is app chains merging with existing app chains, or becoming rollups, or becoming smart contracts on general purpose chains, right? And so these are two very relevant examples, and in a short period of time, I think that will probably prompt other application specific chains to do the same, because cost of security is too high, alignment with other ecosystems provide value, like the maintenance also of having to run all the complexity of having to run your own validator set, and the politics around all that, and the governance and everything is like a huge overhead for a lot of teams. Yeah, do you think this is also something that will accelerate?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what makes Silicon Valley work is like you have this like exit opportunity of like a, you don't have to go IPO. Eventually, you can get acquired by a larger company, and I think it actually allows a lot of like independent research to be done. But then like you work with a larger project company to like productionize and like do help with the go to market. So I think that if anything, it's more surprising we haven't seen as much M&A in crypto. I think the biggest one has been actually like Polygon, like has done a lot of like very successful M&As. But outside of that, like not so much. And once again, to be clear, right now, like right now, there's no talk of any sort of like token merge or anything between Osmosis and Umee. Right now, it's just a chain merge. You have the Osmosis chain, you have the Umee chain. We're like combining the chains, but right now Umee will be have its own governance token, and it'll still be governed independently. And then any sort of like token swaps or anything that Osmosis and Umee want to do together can be decided by the independent respective governance systems.
All right, let's talk about this Prop 858. You had posted this on the Cosmos Hub forum a couple of weeks ago now, and it just went up on chain in the last couple of days, I think, over the weekend. Yeah, what's the deal with this prop? Why do you want Cosmos Hub to provide you liquidity? You're not part of AZ.
I think Osmosis is the biggest portion of AEZ. We've been the primary, AEZ stands for Atom Economic Zone, and I think Osmosis has been the primary driver of like Atom in DeFi for the last 2 years. So I would actually push back saying we are definitely part of the AEZ. If you wanted to find, if AEZ just means like a set of ICS chains, then like yeah, that's true. But that's because like I don't know. I think ICS as a technology just doesn't make sense for Osmosis in its current form. I think the technology, I don't think it makes economic sense. I think validators get kind of screwed via the current economics of ICS. I think, part of the goal of Osmosis is we want our validators to do more and more. So starting pretty soon, validators are going to be running in-chain price oracles. So that's going to be all validators have to provide price oracles. But eventually I want them to do a lot more. So we have this routing server that we build, require validators to run that, require validators to run front end servers. A lot of the entire Cosmos stack, right? Our DEX is the chain is decentralized, but a lot of the stack is quite centralized still, right? The front end, the routers, the database indexers, all these things. And I think the best path to decentralizing these is actually shifting more of these responsibilities onto the validators. And I think just by switching to ICS, losing, I think part of the benefit of an Appchain is having this specialized validator set who's a great example of this is Secret Network, right? Secret Network only works how it does because all validators are required to have an SGX node. And I think putting that sort of requirement on all Cosmos Hub validators will actually limit the amount of people who can run Cosmos Hub validators, which is I think the opposite of what the hub wants. So yeah. I think having specialized validator sets is good. This is why we came up with mesh security, because it's actually the system that allows economic security to be shared while allowing for specialized validator sets.
Yeah, I was just fucking around when I said that it wasn't part of Osmosis wasn't part of AZ. I mean, I think that I heard someone say this recently. AZ is kind of like the European Union, and the different economic, security and monetary alliances that exist within Europe, right? There's some that overlap and there's some that don't, right? You have the economic zone, and then you have Schengen, and then you have the EU, the Eurozone, and sometimes those overlap and sometimes don't. Switzerland doesn't use it's part of Europe, it's part of the economic zone, but it doesn't use the euro, right? In this sort of thing. So I think for AZ, it's kind of similar. Some chains are going to use security, other chains are not, but they're part of the economic zone that makes, Cosmos and the hub and Atom more valuable, and like certainly Osmosis has played like a huge role there. But yeah, we haven't talked about this proposal yet.
So the proposal is basically like, for a lot of things, we need ST Atom. I think that like Atom is like the base money of Cosmos. So what that means is like it's the base collateral asset, right? And so, but really, people, this all kind of actually ties. It's a little bit related to 858 as well, which was the halvening proposal. But the general idea is that, like, at the end of the day, I think people prefer to use LSDs as collateral, and you see this happening in Ethereum, where like you have LSDFi is growing very rapidly because people would rather be earning the staking rewards while being able to continue to use DeFi. And basically, right now, the Atom staking rate was and still is a bit high, like really quite high. And what that does is it makes it more difficult for Atom to be used at so the economics of LSDs, right? You can use ST Atom as collateral on Levana or Mars or, Margin or Membrane or Umee or all of these like places, but you need a way you need liquidity for it to be able to convert ST Atom into Atom. Now, the problem is that like that liquidity needs to be subsidized. In Ethereum, the ETH staking rate is like less than 6%, maybe less than 5% even. And so, if you have the exit liquidity needs to be sitting in ETH. And that ETH is not earning the staking rewards. And you have to assume these are pretty like pro users who are providing liquidity here. They don't want to be foregoing staking rewards. So the thing is that with ETH's like 5% staking rewards are made up by the combination of trading fees, volume, Lido incentives, and curve incentives. So the three of them together can add up to just barely eke out and like make up the 5% yield that compensate the 5% yield that the LPs are like foregoing. Now, how do you like deal with this for Atom when it was having 15% staking rewards? You just couldn't. And that's where Stride came up with this idea of like, oh, let's use protocol owned liquidity to help do this, where it's like it is in the Cosmos hubs, like it behooves Cosmos hub to like drive demand for Atom as collateral, because at the end of the day, that's what Atom is. It's a meme token, right? It is just like the way Bitcoin is, and this kind of like the way ETH is, really, if you think about it. And so but your goal is to drive the usage of your meme token as collateral in like different projects in DeFi and like have things dominated in it. And so to get ST Atom used as collateral, we needed to inject some Atom liquidity so that ST Atom can be liquidated into that at some sort of like discount, basically. And hopefully this halvening stuff will, and if we continue to decrease the Atom inflation rate, maybe, the hub doesn't have to be actively doing this POL in the long term. But to begin with, this is like, I think the way that we came up with to like stopgap.
Okay, so the idea here, I think this was also described in the Blockworks research, is that if you reduce the staking rate, then people will have an incentive to use their Atom as collateral, and instead of as just like sitting there and being used in liquid stake, basically using the liquid staking tokens as collateral. So we're trying to incentivize people to use Atom as collateral instead of staking it.
No, it's actually different. I still think people are going to want to use ST Atom as collateral. It's what the thing is, in order to enable the usage of ST Atom as collateral, you still need Atom sitting in the ST Atom liquidity pool, and you need to compensate that Atom with their foregone staking rewards.
What's been the reaction so far to the proposal?
Basically overwhelming support. I mean, I think it's currently at like it was surprisingly overwhelming support. I think 95% yes right now or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's 72. But I mean, by the time this goes out on Thursday, we're recording this
72%
on Monday,
yes,
December 4th.
22% abstain. So like only 5% no right now.
Yeah, yeah. I also think it will go through. And so how much? This is nine. So basically, like $9 million in Atom.
900K also. It not 900K Atom. Basically, it's roughly double what not roughly. It's exactly double of what the Cosmos Hub already provisioned into Astroport on Neutron. Currently, the pool on Osmosis does about 22x the volume, and so I think it's just asking for twice as much liquidity. But that twice the liquidity is going to go a lot further because of Osmosis's contra liquidity pools. Yeah.
So you said something earlier, which I think is a good segue into this other topic I wanted to discuss, which is that Atom is this meme token, and I think you've been pretty vocal about the AZ ICS kind of direction that Atom has taken, and have argued for the hub to really embody its memeness as a governance hub, and for Atom to embody its memeness as a governance token. Can you describe your thesis here?
Yeah. Basically, crypto needs like capital assets. Today we only have two main capital assets, which are Bitcoin and ETH. Everything else is like leagues away. And to create a new capital asset, I think over focusing on revenue is like not okay. To become number three, right? The number three crypto asset is not going to be just like it's not going to be like a utility token. It's going to be a capital asset, and all capital assets are meme tokens to some extent. Gold is a meme token, right? US dollar is a meme token, and so for Atom, so Bitcoin follows this like unique monetary policy that got people excited around it, right? It was this idea of like fixed supply, like no, it can never ever change, like 21 million till the end of time. ETH, achieved its moneyness off of, basically the bankless guys shilling ETH's money, but basically like you have this like double like system of EIP 1559 on one side causing a burn, and then you have this proof of stake basically causing like new inflation to come in. And so you have, I call like Bitcoin a digital gold, ETH is the petrodollar, right? It's like its value is driven by its demand. So the more demand for gas there is, like EIP 1559 burns it, but then the more demand there is for capital, it like, more people will stake it to use LSDs. It'll cause a little bit of inflation. I think, but both Bitcoin and ETH are like not very dynamic. Like, ETH is a little bit more dynamic than Bitcoin, but like it's still pretty stationary. I think Atom can be, I think like a more general take is like, I think to become a third capital asset, you have to do something different, right? Bitcoin had a lot of people try to copy what Bitcoin did, right? You had like Litecoin and Dogecoin and all these like things that played Bitcoin's game. None of them worked, right? ETH went ahead and were like, "Oh, we're doing something."
I mean, they're all above Atom in terms of market cap.
That's true. That's true. Some level.
And
of
so is
readiness.
XRP, by the way.
That's true. But like, I think ETH went ahead and just played a completely different game, right? It's like, no, this like dumb, this like fixed supply thing is stupid. We're just gonna like do something like a different thesis on money, and I think it worked out well for them. And I think Atom like. I think everyone who's just trying to play the same game as ETH will never like reach that same level, right? I think Atom has this opportunity. I think it is the most decentralized governance token in all of crypto, and I think it should lean in on that. And once you actually have a governance system, you can do more dynamic things, such as like more active monetary policy, which is what we did, right? I think that was a great success. We like governance said, hey, we think that the inflation rate of Atom is too high and we're not going to follow this stupid code is law thing. We're actually going to like use governance to change the inflation rate. That is like what a normal thing to do, right? Like you should, just because it was written into the code once upon a time, like into the white paper, I guess, actually like 4 or 5 years ago, no, governance should be able to update this. And there's, I think, more interesting things Atom can do as well, like, doing things like this protocol-owned liquidity, or doing like incentives for driving demand of Atom. So this is something I've been talking about with the Stride team and AADAO folks of like, if we want to like drive more demand for Atom as collateral, we should be doing rev share with projects for having Atom as collateral. So if like Levana has a bunch of like Atom collateral or ST Atom collateral, it should get some like Atom revenue cut, possibly from that. Like, Stride takes 10% off the top of the staking rewards. Maybe they can give half of those to LVN holders, or if Kujira has a bunch of Atom collateral, that can go to Kuji holders, or if Osmo liquidity pools have a bunch of ST Atom collateral, that can go to Osmo holders. So
it's basically incentivizing projects and protocols to use Atom as collateral.
Exactly. So it's like, now we can go to Maker and be like, hey, add Atom as collateral, and if your Atom collateral grows, then great, you guys here's a free revenue stream for you guys. I don't see any reason for them not to take that deal.
I mean, where would that revenue come from? Would that be like hub revenue or
staking rewards?
Staking rewards. Okay, yeah.
So basically, like I said, right now, Stride takes like a 10% off the top of all the staking reward revenue of ST Atom, right? What I'm suggesting is like they could split that with the projects that drive demand for ST Atom.
Okay, so the idea, like, I think that the high level idea is, Bitcoin and ETH each have their memes. Lots of kind of chains that came about around 2017, 2018, Cosmos and Polkadot, and like tried to scale ETH by sharding state into like different app chains or different like domains of state, but like create composability. In the end, it's nothing like sort of fundamentally new in terms of like creating new memes. It creates new paradigms for building blockchains, but it doesn't like create a new capital asset in the same sense that Bitcoin and Ethereum are. And so here the idea is like, let's turn the Atom token into this collateral asset by giving it this memeness and encouraging projects to use it as collateral, so that it can gain in demand and also in value.
It also aligns everyone with Atom, because now all these projects have a revenue stream denominated in Atom. And like, it doesn't have to be liquid Atom right away, right? It could be like Atom bonds, for example. So it's like, oh, here's Atom that gets unlocked in 6 months. So now it's like, now all these projects are like have Atom on their treasury, on their books. And it's like, it kind of like makes it so like, the AZ is aligned around, like what I define as the AZ is aligned around Atom.
Yeah. When you said earlier that Atom is the most decentralized token, were you talking about in its distribution?
In its governance processes and distribution, right? Like Bitcoin and ETH, definitely more decentralized, but they're not governance tokens. Atom only gave Atom's ICO was like 80% of the supply, right? That's like quite high relative to the standard for projects today, right? Today you look at like the token distributions, it's like, okay, 5% for an airdrop, 20% for the team, 20% for operations, 20% for VCs, like, it's like, and you kind of, and just like none of these processes are set up as such, right? If you saw what happened with like the Arbitrum vote that happened like, it was probably like 6 months ago, where like the foundation just like, the treasury was in the hands of the foundation. The foundation just executed a trade, and then the community was like, "What the fuck? Like, we never voted. We never agreed to like vote on that." And so then they're like, "Oh, sorry, we'll put up the proposal now."
Surprise, bitch! We have the keys.
Yeah, and then what happened was they put up the proposal, and the community was super against it. Then at the last minute, a VC just came in and just like swung the vote entirely, because you see the same thing happen with like Uniswap, right? Like, I know this because I once tried to like pre-Osmosis days. I tried to like governance attack Uniswap for fun, and I realized it's impossible because Paradigm, A16Z, and Uniswap Labs together can like block anything. And so, I think people often say like, oh, look, Cosmos governance is so centralized because of the validators, but I think that's like similar to like people's misunderstanding of how mining pools work as well, where it's like mining pools, it's like miners can switch pools whenever they want. It's the same thing here, right? Like all delegators actually do have their own like stake, and I'm actually very open to decreasing the power of validators in like Cosmos governance. But yeah, so I think that both in terms of distribution and just like governance culture, right? The fact, I saw these, like, I saw a tweet from, I forgot who, but like, the fact that the founder of a project could like want one thing and the community, the founder of the project is like, oh, this was my vision, but like the governance will be like, nope, we don't care. We're going to like do it this way instead. And I think that's definitionally like how good governance should work.
Speaking of which, we can also bring up we can also talk about Atom. So I do want to ask you just one more question about this. So basically, like, what needs to happen for this vision to come to fruition? Like, what? I know you've sort of like made this claim on Twitter that this should be the case, but
yeah. What's
the plan to get there? What does the hub need to do? What does the community need to vote on and action on?
So I think honestly 858 is 68 is a good first step, because it's the Cosmos Hub governance agreeing that like, hey, ICS is not what defines AAZ, right? It's like we're not going to be favoritist towards Neutron just because it's using ICS, but rather like, hey, if osmosis is where demand for Atom is, we're going to help like foster that demand for Atom on osmosis by providing liquidity. So I think that's honestly a really good first step. I think the next thing to do is, the other good step was the halvening proposal, right? It's like, okay, the governance is saying, no, we are in control of monetary policy. I believe that like effort capital, the halvening was only the first step. There's a lot more like changes to be made to the monetary policy going forward. I think the next one is like, governance should probably demand that Stride like implement some sort of rev share like this, or like so that way it like helps achieve that goal. To an extent, I think it's just like a narrative thing as well, right? Like I think everyone in the community has to like stand behind like, this is the direction, and now let's all like rally around this, and like we need to be like shouting this from the rooftops, like this. Right now, there's just like so much conflict. Atom is money, right? Like right now, there's just so much like internal like confusion on what the purpose of Atom is. I think, maybe some sort of gov prop that's like, hey, this is like setting the direction of Atom, and we're gonna like let's all rally behind this.
Are you gonna do it? You're gonna make a gov prop?
Once I finish the other 5-10 gov props in my backlog, yes. But I'm working with like effort capital and like DAO folks and stuff to like help shape this generally.
I mean, I'm on board. I think that AZ is a good attempt to try to give the hub some legitimacy. I mean, it's the best attempt we've had in a long time, right? But the thing is that there's increasing competition to the hub. So like Celestia and now like Eigenlayer and all of the other L1s, whether it's Polygon or whatever, these are all competing for developers and for applications to go build there, and a lot of them have liquidity, and a lot of them have like lots of people who are excited about them, like Celestia, for instance, right? And narratives that are very strong. And so the hub's AZ narrative and this whole idea of like a hub of applications that kind of serve each other's purpose and sort of builds this ecosystem, it's not. I mean, it's cool, but it's not like super exciting, right? It doesn't like rally. It hasn't really rallied the community, I think. Like, people are like, oh, okay, cool, like AZ, great, like it's not like a rallying cry for all Atom holders, and I think that's kind of what we need. We need like this rallying cry. And this is a rallying cry. I mean, like. It could work. It could also not work. But
I think it's like a route. It's so like simple, right? That's what I love about it. It's like it feels like, to me, it feels like that like bell curve meme. It's like, like ICS, all this stuff. It's like no, it's just like Atom is money. It's like governance based money, right? And I think there's like value to this. Like if Bitcoin and ETH are just too dumb. Like humans like can actually make good decisions. Let's build proper and Cosmos governance is far from perfect, right? Like I think there's a lot of improvements that like Cosmos governance could be doing, but like let's start making those changes and like double down on this as like the direction. Like the gov module is probably currently the most under-resourced module in the Cosmos SDK from from the hub side, and like it should probably be like the most important one that Osmosis has funded a big revamp to the gov module, so hopefully like the hub will be able to reuse a lot of the work that we've done.
Yeah, I mean the governance module should have like all of DAO's functionality basically, right? It should have like a whole bunch of extra functionality that's been built later, right, in Cosmosm, but just doesn't exist in the gov module.
Yep.
So yeah, we briefly discussed the idea of a founder being out of favor with the community. So coming back to the passing of 848 and the subsequent fork threats or I don't know if they're threats, but this Atom 1 idea that Jay was talking about Atom 1 back in the Atom 2.0 days. I think this proposal is a little bit different. But yeah, what's the high level idea with Atom 1 and what's the current status of this potential fork?
Yeah. Okay. So here's my, let's call it a little bit of a charitable view on like what Atom 1 is from like, the discussion for Atom 1 actually came out on a call with me and Jay and a couple other people. And it is like before any of the halvening and everything, but it basically came from this perspective of like I was telling him about this like governance like view of like Atom, and he's like, yeah, this makes sense. Or his take was governance needs political parties, and he effectively saw that like his take was, or I forgot whose take it was. It was a combination of Dave, me, Jay, and Chanko, but we were basically going down this route of okay. If we believe that most capital of Atom is actually going to be held in LSDs, right, because that's what's going to be used as money everywhere, then these LSDs actually have massive voting power. They're going to be the biggest owners of governance power, effectively. And these actually probably serve as good shelling points to build political parties around. So instead of having a single, and it behooves Atom to not have a single solely dominant LSD, but actually have a couple of competing ones. But what caused, you see this happening on Ethereum. The problem with with LSDs is the economic incentives of LSDs drives towards centralization because you want as much liquidity aggregation as possible. But what leads to some fragmentation on LSDs is different political views. So like Rocket Pool has a pretty different political stances than Lido, like when it comes to like Ethereum governance ideas. And so it's like, okay, let's actually leverage that and build political parties around LSDs. And now this is where like Jay is like, paranoia comes in. He's like, oh, Stride is like the representation of like the informal ICF cabal that's like trying to destroy the hub, and so we need to build a competing political party called Atom 1. So, and build an LSD around that, which, okay, that, I actually quite like the Stride team. I think that's a little bit of a mischaracterization of that. But the general take of like, okay, let's build an LSD that is is based off of a specific political view. And that's why it actually, I'd go so far as to say it actually kind of makes sense. So if you choose like the halvening prop as like your to build your political party, you want to like send it, like coordinate the people who like have a shared political view. And I guess Jay's take is that everyone who voted no on this is like pro-conservatism of the hub, and if that's the goal of the political party, is to be the hub conservatives, then like, distribute your political party membership membership cards to the people who voted no on that proposal. That is my like high level charitable view of like what is happening. Now the problem with Jay is that like he's so isolated from the rest of crypto that he doesn't know the standard terminology that everyone else uses, and so struggles to explain his ideas in a way that most people understand. I think if you explain this idea of political parties, LSDs as political parties, I think it's actually this like very, very interesting insight in like crypto political economics, right? And like I just think he's not very good at explaining it, but I think high level it makes sense.
What do you mean he's so isolated he doesn't know what terms people use? Like
I don't think he actually understands the term. Like, I had to explain to him what an LSD is, like, or like, yeah, like. I
mean, doesn't he know what liquid staking derivatives are?
Not really. He's like, it's weird. Like, even this whole like photon thing that he had from a long time ago. It was basically this, but like, I don't think anyone got that. I mean, obviously, and there are some things he did differently. Like he wanted it to be like, photon is sort of this like thing, like LSD-ish thing that like gets minted and burned on a bonding curve, like based off of atom. But like, I was like, oh, that makes it so the photon price isn't equivalent to that. What you can instead do is make it so like you do a variable like unbonding rate, and then you let the market figure out the actual proper rate between the two. So there's a lot of like things that like he just like I don't know if he really like. I'm sure he maybe knows these terms, but he doesn't realize there's standardized terms that everyone there's a shared vocabulary that we use to share our ideas, and if you're not plugged into that shared vocabulary, it's very hard for other people to understand your ideas. Even if
maybe it also just is that he like the shared vocabulary that everyone uses doesn't accurately represent like what he thinks, like what he wants to build, right? So like you can.
That's true. But at the very least, putting it in terms of some shared vocabulary, and then say, okay, this is the diff of what my idea is from the standards.
Yeah. So what's the current kind of status of? Is Atom going to have a fork? Is this going to happen? Or
so I don't know what the current status of Atom 1 is. Like this is all like from a discussion that happened like over a month ago at this point. Like before the halvening and everything, and I was like, yeah, this sounds great. I mean, that sounds like a cool idea to like build a political party LSD. So I don't know I have not even read like the current Atom 1 proposal or anything. So I don't know how much it's diverted from that original idea.
Yeah. Well, those who are interested should go back and listen to my episode with Jay from over a year ago when we talked about Atom 1. But probably I should try to get him on and just like discuss this in detail. This is kind of a weird episode because it's not like a proper interview. We're just kind of going all over the place. But it's interesting. It's like I actually like this because we can just talk about things that are happening right now.
Yeah.
So what's going on with Atom 2.0? Like you guys announced this smart account at Cosmoverse, and I'm still waiting for my smart account. I still want to ditch my ledger so I can use passkeys. And
Osmosis 2.0.
When intents, when CL hooks, when beats sexes.
CL hooks, I think, should be in the next chain upgrade, which definitely should be happening by end of year.
So what are CL hooks? Maybe what's a CL hook?
CL hooks is a thing that allows developers to add custom logic to concentrated liquidity pools. So this is very similar to what Uniswap v4 does on top of Uniswap v3, where it's basically saying like, hey, you want, like for example, that we can, examples of what you can use this custom logic for. The provenance team wants to use this to add a whitelist for like trading. So they want to take some of their assets, list them, but they want to say, oh, only like this whitelist who has passed our KYC can trade or LP in this pool. So what it will do is every time you try to execute a swap, it'll use their custom logic to go check your address against a whitelist, and if it's not in there, it'll just say no, it'll reject the swap.
Okay.
Another one would be adding an additional fee. So this is something that we're discussing with a couple of teams, the Apollo team, Astroport team, where it's like, hey, you can do a swap, but you can add a custom hook with logic where it adds an additional swap fee. So, currently Osmosis already takes like a 10 bips like protocol fee, but like Apollo might be like, hey, anything that's like traded on these pools that we're adding liquidity to, we want to add an additional 5 basis point fee that gets sent to the Apollo DAO. So we can like do like these custom things like that. And there's all sorts of other use cases of these custom logics as well. So that's what the CL hooks are.
Ultimately, it's a developer tool. It's a developer feature that allows developers to add extra functionality when interacting with a concentrated liquidity pool.
Exactly.
Cool. And smart accounts.
Smart accounts. So we decided to break down smart accounts into like a couple segmented things. So the first thing that we're doing is the one-click trading. So this basically means that like you'll be able to, instead of having to sign every single transaction you make, when you log in, you authenticate a key. It generates a key in your browser, which is typically very insecure, but we'll get into why we're okay with this. And then you can like do your like trades, and you can just click, just like on Binance or Coinbase. You just click and it does the trade. You don't have to like do an email confirmation for every trade you want, unless you're doing a big trade or unless you're withdrawing assets or something like that, right? Then it asks for these confirmations, which is what we're doing as well. So there are projects out there who've already done like one-click trading, like DYDX even has it. But the way they do it is actually quite insecure because all your funds are on this browser hotkey. And what we're doing is like, no, let's put rate limits on these things where it's like, okay, when you log in, it says, oh, you can trade with up to like 5. The initial one we're doing is like trading with up to 5% of your portfolio. And that means that you can like, you can like trade back and forth as long as the balance of your portfolio doesn't go down by 5%. That means you could be like, if you're paying too much in trading fees, that could cause your balance to go down. Or if you're going from a high cap token to a low cap token. So if you're just sitting there trading Bitcoin and ETH and Atom, like that's okay because no one can really steal your money from doing that, right? All they can do is basically cause you to pay a lot of trading fees. But if you're trying to go from like Bitcoin to like some random shitcoin that you created, our thing will be like, no, that's effectively a loss of money. And so like that's capped at like 5% basically. We're doing that. We're also working with a company called Blockade to build a cosigner, which is like, so Blockade, they do some stuff. They work with wallets. They have this like machine learning based, I'm going to use the new buzzword. They probably called themselves machine learning last year, but now AI is all the hype. So AI powered thing that like it's a security check basically, where like they do all sorts of things like check where the history is coming, like transaction patterns. They check like which like server you're accessing the site from and all this stuff. And it will like what they do today with wallets is basically like give you a warning of like, hey, something seems wrong. You should probably be careful when signing this. So what we're working with Blockade on our smart accounts is being a cosigner, where you can optionally say that, hey, if I generate this key, this hotkey, and I want to sign a transaction, what it does is it sends it to Blockade as well. They evaluate the transaction you're doing, and if they think it's safe, they will co-sign it as well and then submit it to the chain. So that way you have this like, if Blockade thinks something is sketchy, like they can block the transactions from going in using your hotkey.
Amazing. I'm happy I don't have to go every time.
Yeah. So one-click trading is
With
the
the
first
ledger.
thing we're doing. Next, we're probably going to work on like the pass keys and the onboarding and stuff. What we
Yeah.
realized was
I mean, the one-click.
a lot of the stuff that was complicated on like, the UX flows was for new user onboarding, because you have to deal with like how do people create a smart account when they don't have any tokens at all, and it was like you end up in this like weird, like crazy, all these edge cases, and we're like, okay, let's ship something that like makes our life better for our existing users, and that's why we're starting with the one-click trading.
That's great. I mean, I like one of the most annoying things about using DeFi is just like every transaction having to. I mean, since if you use a ledger, right, having to like flip through all these pages, and if you're doing many, you're restaking, you might be moving some assets, you might be doing a bunch of trades. You spend a lot of time sort of on your ledger doing this. And any way that we can use, I presume this uses auth to simplify certain types of transactions. That'd be great. I was talking to a team this week that is building kind of like a governance tool where basically you give auth authorization to like their key for governance votes only, and every time a new governance vote comes up on the chains that you're subscribed to, it just pops up as a message in your Telegram with like 4 buttons: yes, no, no veto, and abstain. And you could just vote right there in Telegram without having to whip out your ledger, open up the Kepler wallet, or any of that. You just vote in Telegram. And it's like, I mean, this I think would just improve and increase governance participation if everybody was using this.
Yep.
Which Osmosis apps are you most excited about?
I mean, the obvious answer is Lavana, because they're launching their token next week, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
You can buy, at the launch, all you can do with it is buy socks. So that's it's a utility token for buying socks. But they may or may not add more utility over time. And then, but I don't know. I think otherwise, pretty excited about. I think Margin is quite cool with like the squared assets.
Yeah.
It's actually like one of my like best friends, Zubin, like Open. They came up with the idea of squared assets. They did it for ETH. But then, they went through some legal issues. But, what's cool about Margin is that they're doing it for all sorts of assets. So they have Squasmo and Squatum, and I think Bitcoin, and soon TIA as well. So that's really interesting. And then
so Margin is just it's basically like this leveraged long or leveraged short that you take, and it's sort of like this pre-programmed, like the leverage long and leverage short is programmed into the asset price.
Yes, exactly. It does this like square of the asset. So if Atom goes up 2x, your position goes up 4x. If Atom goes up 3x, your position goes up 9x. So it's just like really good position. The thing is, you have to pay a funding rate, a relatively high funding rate for this position. That's where the shorts take the money, because in a pure payoff, the shorts are kind of like not making that much. So it's more similar to an option, right? When you buy an option, it's the premium that you're paying for, or that the other side is earning. So yeah, that's kind of what Margin is. Membrane. There's this new project called Temporal that is doing like fixed rate interest loans. So there's a lot of cool stuff happening right now.
All right. Well, I got to check all this stuff out. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on again and shooting the shit, as they say, and sharing your thoughts on all this stuff. And I really look forward to seeing your proposal for Atom as money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of weird, right? Because it doesn't really require the community to agree on anything or to action on anything other than just get behind this idea.
Yes.
And then up from that we might get some Stride having part of the fee go to protocols that utilize Atom as collateral, and so things like this. But it starts from an agreement that this is the vision, and it's a fairly simple vision. This is what I kind of like about it. But yeah, well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon, I guess.
Cool.
Maybe you can come back on in a couple of months and we can do this again.
Yeah.